All right, real quick, key takeaway from your 10-day forecast. Low rain chances. I see much cooler, drier weather on the way later on next week, so we can look forward to that.
Yeah. All right, we will take it. Thanks so much for joining us here on Wink. Our next newscast is an hour away on CBS. Wink News will return on the CW tonight at 7:30.
This is Wink Tracks the Tropics, powered by the Weather Authority.
When the tropics are active, timing is everything. The Weather Authority is keeping you prepared.
The latest update did come in from the National Hurricane Center. Helene moving north-northeast. Winds have increased up to 90 miles per hour.
Keeping you informed.
It's now 170 miles northwest of us, and as we had mentioned, this is a major Cat 4 hurricane. This is going to have major landfall implications.
Southwest Florida has seen its fair share of storms in the past few years.
We are leaving immediately after this because it is not safe. You're starting to see some of these debris, sticks flying up and out, and it's one of the reasons why Sanibel is evacuated. It clearly is not safe out here.
But our slice of paradise has bounced back in ways we'd never expect.
It was tough.
We had each other, and that's a good thing.
I wouldn't have made it without Marianne. We're gonna make it, though. We're gonna make it.
Wink News has been there with you every step of the way, and that won't change.
Yes, we avoid the worst part of the storm, but the wind field's growing and the pressures are deepening. We're gonna feel more of that influence on the back end with the surge.
From forecast cones to important safety reminders, the Weather Authority has you covered. You're watching Wink Tracks the Tropics.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Wink Tracks the Tropics. I'm Wink's Weather Authority Val Simpson, and Melissa is in the Caribbean as a tropical storm still for now, that is. And the big question on everybody's mind is, where is it headed? What path is it going to take? And we're going to be talking about that in today's episode. But I do want to bring up our panel. Hi, guys. How's everybody doing today?
Doing good. Good morning.
And before we get anything started, I just want to ask this question. Is there anything that Southwest Florida or Florida in general has to be watching for? Or will Melissa bring any type of risk for Southwest Florida and Florida?
At the moment, no. Not one bit whatsoever. The biggest thing that we're seeing is a couple cold fronts moving in across the area that will keep this system well east of the state. And steering currents are at a minimum across most of the Caribbean, which is why this system is going to be hanging out there. And it's why I think our viewers might even get tired of us saying Melissa over and over and over again for the next 7 days. I saw Josh's head swaying no a second ago. Josh, what do you have to add for that from what you've seen so far this morning?
Yeah, I would say watching, absolutely. Worrying, no, not at this point. Anything that's in the Caribbean, you want to monitor. You want to check in with us at least once a day. But I'm telling you right now, our concern meter is still low at this time. There's a lot of things that are working in our favor. That's what we're going to spend today talking about. And you know, you mentioned that everyone's going to get tired of hearing the word Melissa. Imagine if that's your name. You switch on the TV, you're hearing them talk about you all the time for the next few days.
It's a nice sounding name, by the way, if
It is,
anyone's listening or watching and has the name Melissa. Not going to discredit that, just letting you know.
We do have a Wink Weather watcher, Melissa, that was
I loved
actually
her
taking.
post.
Yeah, she was a great sport about it. So shout out, Melissa, if you're watching right now. Oceana, what are your thoughts? I mean, I guess these fronts double positive for Florida, right?
Oh yeah, I think everybody knows by now how excited I am for cold fronts, but there's a whole other reason for that too, as it is kind of a blocking from hurricanes. But there's another thing that, if you have any vacations to any of these islands planned in the next 10 days, even the next 2 weeks, just keep this in mind, because especially in the islands of Haiti, Dominican Republic, even eastern Cuba, we're seeing Jamaica also under a tropical storm watch. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Even those vacations in the Bahamas, we're going to continue to watch closely for that as well.
I might know someone with vacation in the Bahamas coming up.
I might too, and
So-
I'm fingers crossed for him.
Yeah, we're all jelly.
It's not me,
we
by
want
the
to live
way.
vicariously through that one person that we know that is going to be headed to the Bahamas.
So lucky. Hope
All
it's
right,
all good.
guys, I just want to remind everybody this is an interactive platform. This means that we are watching and reading your comments and your questions both on our Facebook platform and also on our YouTube platform. And without any further ado, let's get right to it, because we have the 11 o'clock advisory from the National Hurricane Center that came through. So I want to go ahead. Jonathan, can you go ahead and punch that graphic in? Okay, so here we have a satellite view of Tropical Storm Melissa right now. What you see around Jamaica, that is a watch. We're going to get into that a little bit more further into the episode. And then you also see some red over in the Haiti area. And I know that Oceana will be covering that in just a little bit. So yeah, let's talk about Melissa. And let's talk about the track, because obviously it's a very complicated one, especially when you're looking at it from the graphic that we have. Currently, Melissa has max winds of 50 miles per hour. It's moving west-northwest very, very slowly at only 2 miles per hour. That is the one thing about Melissa that really stands out, is how slow or how snail-like, turtle-like movement we're going to see with this storm. It's almost like it's sitting there for the next couple of days. And when we talk about the track, I'm going to open this up slowly for you so that you can take a look. For the next few days, it will continue to stay a tropical storm. However, as we move into the weekend, it will increase in strength. Remember, it's just kind of sitting there, really, not moving much. And that will be absorbing all of this ocean heat content, sea surface temperatures. At the same time, I do have to say that in the next few days, it's going to be battling with some shear, and also the fact that it is right over very warm, above average warm water. So those two are going to be battling it out. Now look at what happened as we move into the beginning of the week. There's a possibility that it could strengthen into a major hurricane. At this point, I'm talking about a Cat 3 hurricane. Now, this is something that the National Hurricane Center has said in this last advisory, that it is still kind of uncertain in terms of the track, and the intensity is tied to that. And that's why I want to go ahead and pull up the two models that we usually always talk about, the two most important ones, which are the GFS, the American, and the European. Here on this graphic, you can see that the blue is represented by the American, and I want to do a comparison with the European, which is the red one. This would be today. This is an 8-day out graphic, and I want you to notice, look at the GFS, the blue. The GFS still sticking to the fact that it's going to trace Haiti. It's going to trace that southern portion before it actually makes that turn into the northeast, taking advantage of that tug potentially that could be seen with a front that would be pushing through Thursday. However, the Euro does not have that. I'm going to play it again so that we can now focus on the red. The Euro actually has it moving a little bit closer to Central America first before it does that pull, and the pull would be, or the tug, would be over Cuba. I'm going to go ahead and play that for you all. So now let's focus on the Euro and take a look at that. They separate at one point. You can see the GFS, the blue, and there's the red. It's a little different there. They're not in consensus in terms of what that's going to do. And that's why we have that track from the National Hurricane Center kind of like in the middle of where both of these stand. Now, like I said, I played this out. This is about 8 days out. However, in the next couple of days, regardless of the path that it takes, because it's really just sitting there, it's going to be producing a lot of rainfall. This could be very dangerous because we're talking about some areas in the Dominican Republic and Haiti, as well as Jamaica, could see over a foot of rain. Some other locations further out, like Cuba in this instance, you can see it in the green. Puerto Rico, not so much for them. Still, potentially could be seeing a lot of rain in the coming days as well. So very dangerous also because we did talk about this in yesterday's episode where there's very mountainous terrain in that area, and it basically just drops all that water down into areas where there's heavily populated, and that is why it becomes very, very dangerous. Again, the reason that we're worried about the fact that it's very slow moving and that it's just because it's going to be producing all this rain for days and days and days, not really going anywhere. It's not going to be fast moving at all. And then also something else that we need to take into consideration is that the longer that it sits there and the longer that it continues to move into maybe that west motion like we were seeing initially, is all that ocean heat content that we did bring up again, because what happens is hurricanes turn up water. Usually it's on the cooler side, and that slows systems down. But in this case, because of all the ocean heat content available in this area in the Caribbean, which you see these deep reds, that is actually going to unfortunately help strengthen. And we see that reflected on the model intensity guidance that you see here. This has been changing drastically. We've seen the change in the last few days. At the beginning, it was they were estimating that it was mostly just going to stay a tropical storm. Yesterday, we saw that it was mostly going to stay in the Cat 1 category. Now, look at what happens on day 3. Now we're looking at Category 3, possibly, most of the models hinting or inclining towards that. So let's go ahead and punch in the panel. Guys, I know a lot of information to analyze and get through right now. Where do you want to start? Should we talk about the GFS and the Euro? Because I still cannot believe that the GFS is holding on to its guns here, sticking to its guns, like we say, and basically making that trace over around Haiti. What are your thoughts?
I mean, for the longest time, we didn't even think the GFS was wrong, to be honest, just because it was so certain that that first cold front that moves through Florida tomorrow could pick it up and move it over Haiti or the Dominican Republic. But now that is looking far less likely. So even though that's sticking to its guns, quoting what you just mentioned, I'm also adding in the whole European side saying, we thought that was wrong for a long while. Now they've gotten closer together because the European was very far to the west towards Central America. Now it is actually hanging out near Jamaica. So if anything is getting better, I want to say the Euro is getting better to what the possible solution could be with this system.
Yeah, big shout out to the Euro here. I think it's been a little bit more on the ball since the beginning, since we've been tracking this thing. You see a lot of those models kind of leaning more towards that solution. The National Hurricane Center's track also leans a little bit more towards that solution, as you see that little bit of a jog more so back towards the west-southwest at the end of the hurricanes forecast track. So that's kind of my key takeaway from this one.
Yeah. Oceana, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I'm really liking what the Euro's showing, and it has been pretty good so far. And it was an outlier for a minute there, so the fact that it stuck to its guns, it's been pretty confident itself. And I think for all the right reasons. I mean, it only makes sense that the stronger front, as it makes its way down and the storm really hangs out, lingers to the west a little bit more, that one would be the one to pick it up. But that, again, does pose potential danger to the islands there, because that would give it more time over the ocean. Like you mentioned, that ocean heat content is there. It's very warm, and that's why I think the cone is kind of reflecting that at 11 a.m., indicating that it does have the potential to be a major hurricane next week.
Now, I do want to show where the system is right now. I loaded a few graphics in Weather 1, if that's possible, and everyone else could weigh in. Yeah, you can see the visible reflectivity of Tropical Storm Melissa. It is really gaining strength near the center. This is hard to see, but look at this next graphic. Check that out. I mean, we have gravity waves on gravity waves of seeing the center trying to develop right there. You can see the clouds getting cooler farther away from the center. I showed Josh this about 15 minutes ago, and we were talking, it almost looks like a volcano, the way you would affect the volcano, the energy is coming from it. So this is strengthening, and I think the last recent satellite images coming in is kind of also a reason, besides modeling. I think the present satellite analysis from the National Hurricane Center is a reason why they did decide to bump this up as well, just because it's already showing some gathering together of strength, and this is only going to continue over the days ahead. I know Josh had something to weigh on that too.
Yeah, gravity waves are really interesting. It has to kind of do with pockets of stable air versus rising air. You see this phenomenon when you have severe weather setups across the country, and you can also see it sometimes, obviously, in tropical systems. I would definitely say this is a sign of strengthening. The pressure, at least over the past runs, hasn't been dropping very much. You know, when the pressure drops, that's a sign that the storm is strengthening, but sometimes these things kind of happen in phases. Sometimes you get a lot of deep convection, rising cloud tops, more powerful showers, thunderstorms. That's kind of what you're seeing right now. And then you start to see the storm itself kind of catch up because of all of that rising air. So I don't think today is going to be too much the day where we see a lot of that strengthening. I think most of that will likely arrive as we head towards the upcoming weekend, especially into early next week. And when it comes to the intensity forecast, I think that even more so is in line with kind of what the Euro has been saying versus the GFS, because again, if this system is able to sag more so towards the west-southwest, make its way back over some open ocean waters, I mean, that's about the highest heat content probably in this side of the northern hemisphere. So that's why it is still forecast to rapidly intensify as we look ahead towards probably the end of this weekend into early next week. So, you know, it's in the baby stages. This is such a slow-moving storm. We call them like stalking turtles. I mean, it's going to be sitting in the same spot for a long time. So that's why we say, you know, we're just going to have to continue to monitor it and make sure the trends remain our friends.
And I had one more graphic to show that I built this morning because, Val, you mentioned the elevation impact. You know, we could show this cool different change in elevation just based on our graphics here at Wink News Weather Authority. And this is the European model. Just saying that the European model as of this morning is forecasting that Category 3 major hurricane to be near Jamaica as we head towards Wednesday next week. But beyond the strengthening of the system, as Val mentioned a second ago, we have to talk about the terrain element of parts of the islands. In fact, obviously Jamaica has a lot of high terrain. You add a rain element of 10, 15, 20 inches tapped onto the different elevation of the terrain, you're going to have a big situation, big impact, especially with flooding water, especially with a lot of landslides across that area over a week of rainfall that's going to be coming through. That's just Jamaica. Look at Hispaniola. You have Haiti as well as Dominican Republic. Some of that elevation is as high as 10,000 feet off of that mountain range you see to the right of your screen, about 8,800 feet in the mountain range to the southwestern corner of Haiti. So these mountain ranges, mixed with how much moisture could be moving in with all of this rain, can become an issue and almost a bigger story, I think, compared to the strengthening of the actual hurricane. So I just want to build that thought one more time, Val, because I know you had a graphic for that. Kind of cool to see that 3D representation of what that terrain actually looks like. And with these slow-moving systems, a lot of the physics of these hurricanes can bounce off of this terrain and almost feed upon itself to stay out in the water. Sometimes we say, hey, the terrain could have these systems fall apart. Not so much. If there's not much of a steering current pushing it into that terrain, the physics of the hurricane itself would allow it to stay away from that terrain and continue to stay over the open water. I saw that with Hurricane Irma back in 2017. It literally bounced off the northern terrain of Cuba, tried to move on Cuba, but kept bouncing off that mountainous terrain on the northern side, obviously making landfall in Marco Island on that afternoon at September 10th. But just kind of keep in mind that terrain could obviously be an impact to weakened systems, but it also, if there's no steering currents, could have it just bounce away from it and stay out in the open water and continue to strengthen.
Good point. Good point there. Guys, and then also let's bring it back a little bit and talk about this track, because I know that everybody that's watching is probably wondering, this doesn't look like a cone. What's going on?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. It's all got to do with its forward speed, right? As you pump up that cone, it looks more like a Christmas ornament rather than a forecast cone. The way that the cone works is that it's about 5 days, right? 5 days worth of forecast data. Each of those individual forecast points each hour is a circle. And that circle gets larger as you go further in time. The circle represents a historical average of where 2/3 of the storms end up passing. So you got to think to yourself, you know, if it's forecast to do this in one day out, that forecast is more accurate than in 5 days. So that's why once you get to day 5, that's Monday, that circle becomes a lot larger. Now, typically when you have a storm that's moving, normal 10 miles an hour, that ends up looking like a cone because it starts smaller thanks to the first circle being smaller and ends up larger at the end thanks to the forecast error growing. But in this situation, since it's such a slow moving storm, all of those circles are just kind of right on top of each other, and that's why your forecast cone looks more like a forecast sphere circle.
Yeah, I feel like that forward motion being so slow is something that really amazed me with this one. It was flying through the Atlantic, and once it hit the Caribbean, that Caribbean graveyard, it just 2 miles per hour. I mean, that is pretty crazy to me to see on there. I feel like we don't see that all that often. So to see a cone look like that, that's also something that's pretty new to me. That's pretty interesting. I mean, the fact that it's just going to linger and sit and then make its way out of the area thanks to the future fronts.
And I guess that we covered that the main risk here is going to be rain, especially for the next few days or for the next week. However, as we look into intensity for the future, we're looking at a possibly major hurricane as of Monday. Could we potentially see a Cat 4, a Cat 5? Are we pushing it?
I wouldn't say so. Again, I would not rule out that possibility because, like we mentioned, the highest ocean heat content, that's just not the water at the surface, that's really warm water that extends down, well past down in the surface water. So there's an abundant amount of energy sitting there in the central, western Caribbean. There's low wind shear, there's plenty of moisture, there's all the ingredients that we need to see this storm really intensify. Again, it does depend on what that track ends up doing, right? It would have to slide down to the west-southwest in order for that to happen. Let's say if it hugs Jamaica a little bit more, kind of like a central more solution and heads up towards Cuba a little bit sooner, then perhaps you don't see that same level of strengthening. So again, the possibility is there. I call this a high ceiling event, but it has to take a specific track in order to get that strong.
So if we think about and we talk about the tracks and we know that the GFS is now the least likely, and we look at the possibility that the Euro is probably going to be playing out, then we could potentially see a stronger hurricane. Is that what you're saying?
Mo models are actually in between both where the GFS is going and the Euro. The Euro has more of a western outlier. The GFS is definitely a faster, more eastward outlier. The most recent hurricane models coming in, the high resolution models coming in, actually kind of have it almost directly in between both of those. I think that's why that cone is so specifically hanging out in that area. The majority of the Google AI models that have it becoming a Category 3, had it becoming a Category 3 this morning, if not even a Category 4, has it heading just a little bit farther east of where the European takes it, which is the European takes it west of Jamaica. Google AI has it just east of Jamaica and then passing over the eastern side of Cuba. So no matter what, it's a very fine line of where this system can track, and it's just because of the lack of steering. It's going to take some time to see, where exactly it does go and how exactly it does track. For our viewers who are watching here in Southwest Florida, whatever model we are mentioning, every single model has it turning off to the northeast and into the Atlantic, all because of our strong front that we see moving across the state next Wednesday into next Thursday. So I just want to be, just a little bit more verbose with that and just plainly state that as many times as we can, that even though we're mentioning scenarios, models, changes, whatnot, every single possible scenario does have this system moving away from the state of Florida and not moving into the Gulf.
Yeah, speaking of those fronts, Val, do you want to pop up a steering current graphic so we can kind of see those fronts? I know Oceana's the one excited about the cooler weather. So
I might even have one if I still have it in Weather 1 from this morning. I do, yes. In fact, if you want to pop up Weather 1, there we go. That big steering pattern to explain that. The reason why it's moving so slow is because of a lack of steering. The Bermuda High is farther east, the jet stream is farther north. Even tonight's cold front, not far enough south to pick this up like the GFS was initially trying to track it, and still even tracking at this hour. So basically, this system is going to meander across the northern Caribbean because of the lack of steering between now and Sunday. And then this is the big part that I think Oceana is going to be happy about, that strong front that moves through next Wednesday. that's what picks this up and turns it off to the northeast. Oceana, I know you and I were talking about this morning as well. I mean, you know a lot about Florida history, being from Naples. When it comes to these hurricanes, you know, the fronts definitely help pick these things up out of the Caribbean and move it away from the state, right?
Absolutely. I feel like it's honestly an underrated factor of cold fronts that the general public does not really think about. These are huge when it comes to the steering patterns in the atmosphere. I mean, these fronts are so important as far as how far we are in the season. Like Zach talked about yesterday, not all the time do we see this many fronts at the end of October, but in this case we do. So that is a huge factor with the direction of this storm, Tropical Storm Melissa, soon to be a hurricane by this weekend. So that is something to keep in mind, and also the colder temperatures that cold fronts bring. This one, why I'm so excited about it, is because models have been pretty strong that we could be in the low 60s for Halloween. Even the highs topping out around 80 degrees is such a big deal to me.
Yeah, and you know, you mentioned that this front is stronger, right? It's probably the strongest one that we've seen so far in the fall season. And we mentioned earlier the differences between the GFS, the American, and the European model. I'll tell you what, both of them are on board with this front, not only arriving around a very similar time frame, but also a similar strength, right? Producing a lot of wind shear in both scenarios, a pretty deep upper level trough as well. Things working in our favor, not only to make it nice out there for Halloween and the weekend ahead, but also to steer Melissa away from us. So that's why, you know, our confidence continues to grow each and every day that this will not be too much of a concern for us here in Florida.
Yeah, I would say the confidence is still low for where exactly it's going to impact the Caribbean, but our confidence is getting higher and higher, like Josh just mentioned, to reiterate that this strong front is the reason why it's going to keep Melissa away from the state of Florida and have it be pushed away from us, because this front is the only steering mechanism coming close to Melissa anytime soon, and that's going to be next Tuesday into Wednesday. So that's exactly what's going on. We have to have steering currents to be able to move tropical systems across the world, not only across the Atlantic Basin, but across the Eastern Pacific and the typhoons even in the Western Pacific. So always keep that in mind. Those steering currents always at play to cause these systems to move or stall out, like we're going to be seeing with Melissa over the coming days.
So I bumped into Hector in the hallways. He works for our radios here at Wink, and he was telling me that he was going to be traveling to Puerto Rico in the next few days to celebrate his birthday. Does he have something to worry about?
It doesn't appear that Puerto Rico would have as much as an issue.
It's far away from Puerto Rico.
As some of the countries just to the west there, like Hispaniola, you got Haiti, the Dominican, Jamaica, in eastern Cuba, and especially the southern and eastern Bahamas. That's kind of the target zone that should be worried about this system. I think Puerto Rico should be safely enough off to the east. If you're a cruiser and you're heading down there, that's more of an issue.
That was my next question.
But yeah, no, cruisers would definitely have an issue there. The seas are not going to be friendly to you. But in terms of once you're there, it should be just fine. Maybe not the most beautiful weather in the
speaking
world.
of cruises, at the beginning of this episode, we were talking about how someone was going to be headed out to a cruise in the next few days. How's that looking, Josh?
Well, it's next weekend, so I got some time. You know, here's the catch. Melissa's moving so slow right now, but once it gets picked up by that upper level trough, that's the front we've been talking about, it's going to zoom. It's going to be really quick. So probably by the time we get to the middle of next week, like Wednesday into Thursday, all of a sudden this thing is going to pick up a lot of forward momentum. It's likely going to clear out of the vicinity of the Bahamas by the time we get to Halloween. So I'm fortunate for that, just for mine. But again, the days leading up to that is when our friends, especially near Jamaica and Cuba and the southern Bahamas, are going to really need to be monitoring this.
The only thing you have to worry about is that you're going to need to wear long pants and long sleeves on your way.
It'll be a little chilly. Absolutely.
I do have to quote Josh real quick. He said, here's the catch. The catch is that cruises are cheap in September and October because of this scenario. I'm not mentioning the price of that. I'm just saying that the deals,
it's mainly November.
The deals always look amazing.
It's mainly November.
The deals always look amazing. And you know the most active time in the tropics and the Caribbean is late October and November?
No.
He took a chance. He's an adventurer. He likes
No, he is an
He knew
adventurer.
something.
Christopher Columbus,
Oh,
set
whoa.
sail, my friend.
Okay.
Let's see
Okay,
where
coin
you
trick.
land.
I'm dying. All right, guys.
Gilligan Island. So if we had the Gilligan Island theme song and we could play it out for a little bit without getting sued for copyright infringement.
This conversation took a whole nother turn real quick. Oceana, before we leave, I know that you have something for us because we did talk at the beginning that there are some watches in place currently right now. So can we go ahead, Jonathan, and punch weather 3? There we go.
Yeah, so yesterday I kind of rushed through these, but let's talk about it. So watches versus warnings, we have hurricane watches out over in Haiti. It's the peninsula of Haiti. And then we've got tropical storm watch out for the Jamaican islands. So what that means is that tropical storm or hurricane conditions are possible in the next 48 hours. Notice we don't have any warnings out right now. That's because we're not expecting any conditions in the next 36 hours. And again, that way that's slow moving, nothing is expected just yet. We're still in that possible stage. And notice how watches, they release those about 48 hours in advance, whereas warnings, those are a little more imminent. That's more like 36 hours. So yeah, the warning is when those preparations need to be in place, whereas watches are pretty much that. We're watching.
That's awesome. There we go. We cleared that up real quick. But that's good. It's good to know who has a watch right now so that we can keep you guys informed. All right, we're going to be running out of time here shortly. So any takeaways from today's episode, guys?
I think we pretty much touched on everything there. Again, our advice will always continue to be just check in at least once a day while it's down there. All right, later on next week, once it's gone, boom, beautiful. One thing we didn't mention is that the Climate Prediction Center puts out their outlook 2 to 3 weeks in advance. It came out yesterday. Actually, for the second week and third week looking ahead, they're not expecting any new tropical development. At least I don't think we've seen anything on our radar to suggest that either. So that's a good trend. We love that. We'll continue to monitor. But hopefully once we can get Melissa out of here, then things will quiet down for the time being.
My little final takeaway is that even when we are not tracking the tropics here at 11 to 11:30, we do have the Wink News app where we are updating articles right to your phone. We'll send push alerts as well as Melissa strengthens over the coming days. So if you don't have the Wink News app yet, go to your app store, download the Wink News app, turn those alerts to on because you'll get all those notifications whenever we do see Melissa strengthening into a Category 1 storm, into a Category 2 hurricane, and even into a Category 3 major hurricane over the weekend. We're going to talk about Melissa for quite some time, but all of those articles and updates will be right there on the phone for all of your information when we are not on TV in those very few hours that we are not on TV, bringing you the latest information right to your screen.
Thank you. And Oceana, finally, any final thoughts?
I mean, this is, like we said before, something we're going to be talking about for quite a while. So don't get sick of us talking about it. It's going to have new updates every single day, every 3 hours actually. So don't get sick of it. It's going to be talking about Melissa for a while, just a warning.
And go ahead and do a little plug. Where can viewers continue watching you now?
Oh yeah, tune in at noon. I'll have your full forecast and I'll be breaking down Melissa, of course. And I'll be briefly talking about that cold front that we're talking about next week for
There's some
Halloween.
good graphics made. To watch it.
Thank you, panel, so much, and thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow at 11. Bye.